Some men know how to make you feel seen before they vanish into silence. He's not loud when he enters your life. There's something quieter, more haunting. A kind of gravitational pull that doesn't scream, "Look at me," but makes you feel chosen when his attention lands on you. He listens deeply. His gaze lingers with the weight of unshed grief. He touches your hand like it means something. And for a moment, you believe it does. But then the winter comes. Suddenly, the man who once memorized the curve of your voice is gone, not in body, perhaps, but in spirit. His warmth turns to cold politeness. His affection hardens into distance. You wonder if you imagined the whole thing. If maybe you were too much. Too emotional. Too expectant. But what if the very reason he pulled you in is the same reason he had to leave? Because some men carry love like a borrowed coat, they wear it just long enough to remember what warmth feels like. And then they drop it on the floor before it clings too tightly to their skin. You see, he didn't plan to leave. He wanted to stay. But intimacy is a mirror. And for men like him, mirrors are dangerous. He learned long ago that closeness comes at a cost. Maybe not from his childhood. Maybe not from a father who hit or a mother who left. But from the quiet humiliations that life deals out in silence. The coach who made him feel small in front of others. The lover who used his vulnerability as a weapon. The friends who mocked his softness. The office where success meant strangling your own voice. In Jungian language, he buried his anima, his inner feminine, his emotional knowing, in the shadows. To survive, he built a fortress of competence, stoicism, and control. He became the provider, the achiever, the charmer. He mastered the persona that the world rewarded. But beneath it, something rotted, the part of him that still longed to be held without being judged. When he met you, something opened. Not because you were perfect, but because you were real. You reminded him of the tenderness he exiled. And for a brief while, he reached for it again. You became the doorway back to himself. But doorways frighten those who have only known locked rooms. So he does what wounded men do when they come too close to the edge of their buried pain. He retreats. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with absence. With silence. With unfinished texts and conversations that trail into nothing. He may not even know he's doing it. Because abandonment, for him, feels safer than being fully seen. And here's the paradox: the more emotionally attuned you are, the more likely you are to attract this kind of man. Not because you're broken, but because your depth calls to his disowned self. Your emotional fluency makes him feel. And that is both intoxicating and terrifying. He wants your closeness, but he hasn't built the nervous system to tolerate it. His body stores 1,000 moments of shame, of not being enough, of being too much, of being punished for opening up. So when you ask, "Are you okay?" he doesn't hear care, he hears intrusion. When you say, "I miss you," he feels guilt, not love. And when you say, "I need you," he remembers every time someone said that right before they betrayed him. This is not a man who lacks love. This is a man who lacks safety. Because no one ever taught him that love and safety could coexist. No one ever modeled what it looks like to hold space for fear and still stay. So he leaves before he can disappoint you. He pulls away before you can touch the raw, unhealed places he hasn't dared visit himself. He tells himself it's better this way, for both of you. But deep down, he aches for the thing he cannot keep: intimacy without terror. Connection without collapse. And maybe you're left wondering what you did wrong. But that's the final wound: believing his fear was your fault. It wasn't. It never was. What you felt was real. That flicker of tenderness. The way he looked at you like he was remembering something he'd long forgotten. The way his voice softened when you talked about your pain. That wasn't manipulation. It wasn't a game. It was the part of him still capable of love, gasping for air. But love, for him, is not a straight road. It's a labyrinth haunted by ghosts, expectations he couldn't meet, emotions he wasn't allowed to express, moments of failure that calcified into shame. Every time he reaches for closeness, that shame flinches. It tells him, you will fail her, too. And so, in some silent, unconscious pact with his own trauma, he chooses distance over devastation. He doesn't ghost because he doesn't care. He ghosts because staying means confronting a self he has never felt safe to be. The one who cries. The one who needs. The one who doesn't have all the answers. The one who feels fragile and lost and young. Gabor Maté reminds us, people don't become addicted to substances, they become addicted to the relief they provide. And this applies here, too. He is addicted to emotional distance because it offers temporary safety. He is addicted to silence because it soothes the terror of not being enough. He is addicted to the idea of being wanted but not truly seen. And what hurts most is that he can be so convincing in the beginning. You felt his presence, his depth, his rare sensitivity. And it makes you believe, perhaps even hope, that this will be different. That this man, unlike the others, knows how to hold your heart. But holding something doesn't mean he knows how to carry it. His tenderness is real, but it is untrained. Like a violin with broken strings, it tries to play the song of connection but produces discord. Not because the music isn't in him, but because he spent too many years silencing the notes. And yet, this is the same man who makes others laugh with ease. Who shoulders burdens like a soldier. Who gives advice to friends, mentors young boys, or carries his mother's groceries without being asked. He is good. But he is tired. He is needed by everyone, yet deeply unmet himself. No one ever asked what he needed. Because men like him are expected to carry, not to crumble. To seduce, not to feel. To lead, not to long. And so, every time love brushes too close to his inner world, he panics, not in anger, but in overwhelm. And it's here that we meet the true heartbreak. He does not understand his own abandonment. He cannot name it. He only knows the ache that rises when someone reaches too far inside. That ache is ancient. It's the boy who once cried in secret. The teenager who turned his feelings into sarcasm. The adult who mastered being fine while drowning. So when you love him, when you truly see him, you are not just a woman, you are a mirror. And when a man is not ready to see himself, he must look away. You might still search for signs. Reread the messages. Replay the last phone call. Try to decode the moment the tide turned cold. But there was no single moment. There was only pressure, slow, invisible pressure on the fault lines of his unresolved grief. Somewhere deep inside, he knew he couldn't sustain the intimacy he began. Not because he didn't want to, but because the part of him that desired love was trapped beneath years of emotional armor. And in his leaving, he is not just walking away from you. He is walking away from the boy inside who still aches for gentleness. He is abandoning himself, again and again, each time he walks away from someone who gets too close. You didn't break him. You simply touched the place that was already broken. It's easy to confuse this kind of man with someone who lacks commitment. But that's not quite it. He's not afraid of committing to you, he's afraid of what the relationship will demand from parts of him he's never made peace with. When he begins to care, something primal is stirred. Not butterflies. Not joy. But dread. Because caring means exposure. It means dropping the armor he's worn for decades. It means the soft underbelly of his soul is suddenly visible, and he doesn't know if it's safe to keep it uncovered. What happens next is rarely loud. There's no dramatic exit. Just small acts of withdrawal. He stops asking how your day went. Stops answering texts with the same urgency. The rhythm changes. You feel it in your gut, even before your mind catches up. But what feels like rejection is often something deeper, internal collapse. His nervous system, already stretched thin by years of performance and repression, begins to short-circuit under the weight of true connection. His past doesn't whisper, it roars. Telling him that to be needed is to be trapped. That to be known is to be judged. That to stay is to fail. And so he leaves, not always physically, but emotionally. He goes through the motions, but his eyes no longer meet yours with the same honesty. His voice becomes distant, his affection procedural. Not because he stopped caring, but because the act of caring ignites the very wounds he spent a lifetime avoiding. This is where many women begin to doubt themselves. You ask, was I too much? Did I move too fast? Should I have hidden my feelings? But your love did not scare him, his response to being loved did. Because love is the most confronting mirror there is. It strips away the image he's curated. It doesn't care about his job title or his self-control. It sees the boy underneath the man, and that boy has never felt good enough. In Jungian terms, this is the crisis of the persona. The mask he shows the world, the confident, competent, collected self, begins to crumble under the pressure of intimacy. And behind that mask is a fragmented self, a shadow full of unmet needs, forgotten tenderness, and guilt-ridden desire. He has no map for this territory. No language to express what it feels like to be held and terrified at the same time. So he defaults to what he knows: disconnection, stoicism, retreat. And yet, even as he pulls away, a part of him hopes you'll understand. That you won't take his silence as hate. That you'll somehow know that behind his disappearance is a kind of emotional paralysis, an overwhelmed man trapped between the longing to love and the fear of being unworthy of it. But love cannot survive indefinitely in a vacuum. You can wait. You can give space. But unless he begins to face his inner world, to sit with the ghosts of the selves he abandoned, nothing changes. You cannot love someone into self-awareness. You cannot force safety into a system built for survival. And maybe that's the most painful part of it all. Because in the beginning, he made you believe that love could be different. That this time, it would be safe. And then, in his leaving, he didn't just hurt you, he reopened wounds you forgot you had. The wound of not being chosen. The wound of silence after intimacy. The wound of being almost enough. But here's the truth, unwrapped from shame: his abandonment is not a verdict on your worth. It is a reflection of his capacity. He did not stay because he could not. Not because you were too much, but because your presence asked for a depth he hadn't yet made peace with. You offered him a home. He had only ever known how to live out of a suitcase. He may never admit it, not to you, not even to himself, but walking away from what felt real haunts him. Not because he regrets meeting you, but because he caught a glimpse of a life he doesn't yet believe he deserves. There are nights when he replays your laughter in the silence of his apartment, not as a memory but as a question: why couldn't I stay? And the answer, though buried beneath layers of practiced numbness, is simple: because staying meant surrender. And surrender meant giving up the only protection he's ever trusted: control. Control has always been his salvation. Not of others, but of himself. Of his image. Of his emotions. Of how much he reveals, how much he lets in, how much he needs. Needing, in his world, was weakness. Vulnerability was a setup. And so he learned to master the art of being almost close. Just enough to feel connection, never enough to risk collapse. This is the cruelty of emotional repression. It turns love into a threat. Affection into exposure. Intimacy into a battlefield where the enemy is not the other person, but the buried parts of the self now rising to the surface. When you held space for his emotions, he mistook it for pressure. When you celebrated his depth, he felt scrutinized. When you told him he was safe, it only reminded him of how unsafe he truly felt inside. And yet, in the spaces he retreats to, work, performance, solitude, your memory lingers. Not as guilt. Not as fantasy. But as invitation. An echo of what could have been if he had known how to stay. But he doesn't know how. Not yet. Because the boy inside him still waits for the moment someone will punish him for letting his guard down. He still flinches at softness, mistaking it for danger. He still hears the voice, his father's, a teacher's, his own, telling him to man up, to stop crying, to stop feeling so much. You saw him. And for a moment, he felt seen. But when the reflection grows too sharp, too honest, too real, when the mirror shows not just his strength but his fragility, he looks away. This is the tragedy of men taught to repress. They become strangers to their own hearts. They know how to perform affection, but not how to receive it. They know how to protect others, but not how to ask for protection. They know how to seduce, but not how to surrender. And you, standing in the wreckage of what could have been, might still carry the ache. Not just of loss, but of confusion. How can someone be so present, then so absent? So alive, then so cold? But this paradox lives inside many men. Men who've spent their lives being everyone's rock, but no one's soft place to land. Men who grew into roles, not into selves. Men who offer safety but have never truly felt it in their own bones. He may never come back. Or he might return, years later, after therapy, after loss, after life humbles him in the quiet ways it sometimes does. But even if he never speaks your name again, know this, your love was not wasted. It planted a seed he didn't yet have the soil for. It cracked the shell he mistook for a home. It reminded him that something softer lives beneath the armor. And maybe one day, in some quiet moment, he'll reach for that softness, not in fear, but in peace. Not because he lost you, but because he's finally ready to find himself. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who never learned how to stay when love gets real. This story isn't just about him, it's about all of us, and the parts we hide when we're afraid of being truly seen. If this helped you feel a little less alone, share it with someone who might be carrying the same silent questions. Leave a like if the story gave you clarity. Subscribe if you believe emotional truth deserves a voice. And stay with us. Because healing doesn't always start with answers. Sometimes, it starts with a story that finally makes sense.